sequels are the lifeblood that keeps Hollywood chugging along. The sure things that basically every movie studio wants to produce as much of as possible. Why roll the dice on something new when you've got quantifiable proof that audiences want more of an existing thing? And so that's why we'll always have sequels coming out of our ears. But every so often, a movie will be released which audiences will assume is a sequel, only for that to hilariously not be the case at all. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are 10 movies everyone thought were sequels, but weren't. Number 10, Gran Torino. Clint Eastwood's 2008 drama Gran Torino stars the acting legend as a grizzled old man, I mean a real stretch for Clint there, who crosses paths with a local gang while trying to defend his neighborhood. Before the film's release, however, rumors swirled that Gran Torino was actually a secret Dirty Harry sequel, Dirty Harry 6 to be precise, and would see Clint Eastwood deliver a bookending finale to his iconic action thriller franchise. Scuttlebutt indicated that the film would revolve around an aged Harry Callahan seeking revenge for the murder of 2 police officers, one of whom was his grandson. And honestly, it made complete sense. So this one was incredibly easy to believe. Even if that perhaps was the plan at one time, it ultimately wasn't what came to pass. Eastwood actually plays a totally original character, and the reported plot information wasn't correct at all. It certainly would have been an interesting angle, but at the same time, Gran Torino is a strong enough film that it doesn't need to be tethered to an existing IP. Number 9, Cradle to the Grave. Put the number 2 in a movie's title and you're just asking people to assume that it's a sequel, and then leave them thoroughly confused when it isn't. Case in point, the very same year that Too Fast, Too Furious popularised this title format, the DMX action thriller Cradle to the Grave was also released. Now, while you might have figured out that there probably wasn't a film called Cradle 1 The Grave, many fans of the rapper and action schlock in general assumed it was a follow-up to one of DMX's prior action flicks, either 2000's Romeo Must Die or 2001's Exit Wounds, which both shared many of the same cast members. But Cradle to the Grave was a spiritual successor at best, and in pure narrative terms, its very own beast. Number 8, Unknown. 2008's action thriller Taken was a massive surprise box office hit and effectively redefined the career of star Liam Neeson overnight, proving him to be a credible middle-aged action star. By 2010, it was confirmed that a sequel was in development, and the very next year, many fans believed said sequel had swiftly arrived. Unknown. Though it wasn't called Taken 2, a cursory glance at Unknown's posters and trailers made it incredibly easy to believe that this mystery thriller yarn was a follow-up to Taken. The marketing very clearly leaned into the association, splashing the tagline "Take your life back" all over the place, as if to subconsciously plant the idea in your mind that this is a new Taken movie. This time, however, it wasn't Neeson's daughter who was taken. It was the identity of Neeson's protagonist after a car accident leaves him with amnesia. Unknown is a fun yarn all the same, but no, it isn't a Taken sequel. Fans instead had to wait another 18 months for Taken 2 to arrive. Number 7, Troll 2. Troll 2 is one of the most infamous bad movies of all time, an outcome that becomes even funnier when you consider that it's not actually a sequel at all. Troll 2 was filmed under the title Goblins, but its American distributors decided to market it instead as a sequel to the 1986 horror film Troll, to which it is entirely unrelated otherwise. Hell, Troll 2 doesn't even feature trolls in it. The movie revolves around murderous goblins and takes place in the town of Nilbog, which is goblin backwards. You get it? Because this isn't hilariously headache-inducing enough though, 2 movies were then released under the title Troll 3 in 1990 and 1991 respectively, even though neither were actually sequels to Troll 2. It's just crazy! Number 6, Knocked Up. 2007's Judd Apatow-directed comedy Knocked Up was viewed by many as a spiritual successor to Apatow's previous smash hit The 40-Year-Old Virgin, though some went so far as to believe that it was a direct sequel. And honestly, it wasn't that tough to believe at a brief glance. Given the movie's near-identical tone, the fact that Seth Rogen appears in both films as a schlubby stoner, and they share several supporting cast members. Though it's easy to assume that these films both exist within the same universe, they're clearly not featuring the same characters, given that Rogen's knocked-up character is named Ben Stone, while his 40-year-old virgin role is simply Cal. Considering that the 40-year-old virgin was a huge box office smash though, you couldn't really blame anyone involved for not speaking up about the mistaken association. And it sure didn't harm the film's commercial prospects, as it went on to outgross its spiritual predecessor by a huge margin. Number 5. Steel Dawn. To take one look at the 1987 post-apocalyptic sci-fi actioner Steel Dawn, you really couldn't be criticised for assuming that it was a gonzo follow-up to 1984's hit action drama Red Dawn. The title sounds like a natural successor. Its font is even in red on the posters, and said posters also featured star Patrick Swayze wearing a headband just like his character Jed in Red Dawn. Now, in fairness, Red Dawn appears to end with Jed's death, but this hardly would have been the first or last time that Hollywood brought a character back from the dead to ensure a sequel's existence. All the same, Steel Dawn is very much its own thing, more of a western that follows the plot of the classic 1953 film Shane. But with a little imagination, it isn't hard to accept it as an alt-universe sequel to Red Dawn, where Jed survived and the world has gone to hell in a handbasket. Number 4. P2. 2007 horror film P2 turned only a modest profit at the box office. And that might be because nobody could find a copy of P at the local video rental store. Much as its title might make it sound like a slasher follow-up, P2 is actually a standalone horror movie, with its title instead referring to the underground parking garage where protagonist Angela finds herself being stalked by a deranged murderous security guard. Even before the movie was released, articles were readily making fun of its slightly confusing title, which somehow made it all the way through market testing seemingly without anyone pointing out that it sounds like a sequel. Though P2 was indeed a one-off affair, it was nevertheless unofficially remade in the Hindi language last year as a romantic thriller called I Love You, for some reason. Number 3. War Inc. 2008's little-known action comedy War Inc. was assumed by many to be a direct sequel to the much-loved 1997 cult classic Grosse Pointe Blank, and with damn good reason. Like that movie, War Inc. stars John Cusack as an assassin who is beginning to question his career path, while real-life sister Joan Cusack plays his assistant. Dan Aykroyd appears in a supporting role, and the style and tone are basically identical. Yet War Inc. isn't an official sequel in any capacity, most likely for legal/IP reasons. Though given that Cusack both co-wrote and produced the film, it's not terribly surprising that the similarities are apparently deliberate. According to Cusack himself, Disney had little interest in producing a Grosse Pointe Blank sequel, likely due to its middling box office performance, and so he implanted many of his own ideas for the follow-up into the script for War Inc. Basically, he got to make the sequel without incurring any legal trouble. It's just a shame that War Inc. falls far short of its inspiration's brilliance. Number 2. The Exorcism. When the first trailer for the recent Russell Crowe starring horror film The Exorcism dropped, most understandably assumed that it was a sequel to last year's surprise box office hit The Pope's Exorcist. After all, it's another exorcism film with Russell Crowe in it, and the poster even looks near identical to that of The Pope's Exorcist, showing Crowe in a priest outfit holding up a crucifix. But The Exorcism is actually a totally standalone movie, albeit one that was clearly marketed to try and trick people into thinking it was associated with The Pope's Exorcist. For starters, in The Exorcism, Crowe is merely playing an actor portraying a priest in a movie, a fact that the posters obviously neglected to mention. But more crucially, The Exorcism was actually mostly filmed way back in 2019 and spent the better part of 5 years in post-production hell. During this time, its original title, The Georgetown Project, was dropped for the more generic-sounding The Exorcism, which would obviously instantly create a link with The Pope's Exorcist in people's minds. The gambit didn't pay off though, as The Exorcism ultimately grossed just $7.8 million worldwide, barely 10% of the $77 million global haul raked in by The Pope's Exorcist. Number 1. Max Dugan Returns. How many movies have the word return or returns in the title but aren't sequels? Barely any is the answer, and so it naturally tracked that 1983's dramedy Max Dugan Returns was presumably the sequel to a film called Max Dugan, The Adventures of Max Dugan, or something along those lines. But Max Dugan Returns isn't a sequel at all, and actually revolves revolves around Jason Robards' title character, who returns home 20 years after he abandoned his family in the hope of spending time with his daughter and grandson before he dies. Though the film was broadly well received by critics, it did so-so business at the box office, quite probably because casual observers assumed it was a sequel, and even those interested in checking out the original movie first obviously couldn't find it. This would have been especially challenging in the largely pre-internet era of 1983, where the confusion couldn't have just been resolved with a quick Google search.